I ended up getting 3 people fired from their jobs, and it all started with a seemingly minor car accident. But it was my dumb luck on a flight home that truly served up the sweetest revenge. The whole ordeal began in January 2018. My best friend, Leo, his girlfriend, and I were heading home after a night out. We were in my car, but since I'd had a few drinks, I let Leo take the wheel. As we neared a roundabout, a car shot out from a side street, then inexplicably slammed on its brakes right in front of us. Leo swerved hard to avoid a collision, but in doing so, he slammed my car into the concrete median, wrecking both driver's side tires. We managed to limp the car into a nearby parking lot and grabbed an Uber home. The next day, I had the car towed to my trusted personal mechanic. My insurance adjuster came out, assessed the damage, and gave my mechanic the green light to start the work. He fixed everything he thought was necessary, but when he put the car on the alignment rack, he found a much bigger problem. The engine cradle, a core structural part of the frame holding the engine, was bent from the impact. My mechanic didn't have the heavy-duty equipment for that kind of frame repair, so he had to send my car to a larger, insurance-approved company. Let's call them Apex Auto Solutions. This is where things started to go sideways. Apex Auto Solutions didn't even do the work themselves. They outsourced the engine cradle replacement to another garage, which I'll call Precision Performance. The mechanic there, a guy we'll call Rick, immediately created delays. First, he ordered the wrong parts. Then, the replacement cradle they finally got was also bent, so they had to order another one from clear across the country in California. The whole time, the manager at Apex Auto, a Mr. Davison, was impossible to deal with. He never kept me updated, dodged my calls, and was just plain rude whenever I managed to get him on the phone. As a single dad, I rely on my car, and the delays were becoming a huge problem. The correct cradle finally arrived on the exact day my rental car coverage was set to expire. Rick had to rush to get the job done that day. He supposedly test drove it and returned it to Apex Auto just before they closed, where I was anxiously waiting. He gave the car a clean bill of health, and they handed me the keys. The moment I drove off the lot, I knew something was wrong. I have some mechanical experience, and I could hear the distinct humming sound of a bad wheel bearing. The next morning, I called my insurance adjuster, who told me to take it back to Precision Performance and have Rick look at it. So, I called him up. "Hey, it's the guy with the engine cradle job," I said. "I think there's something wrong with one of the wheel bearings." Rick's response was stunning. "Yeah, I knew about that," he said casually. I was floored. "You knew? Then why did you give it a clean bill of health?" "I was being rushed to get it back to you, so I just said it was fine," he admitted without a hint of shame. "It wasn't a critical failure, so what's the big deal?" This revealed Rick's greatest fatal flaw, a lazy arrogance and a complete disregard for accountability, which ultimately sealed his fate. I took a breath. "Okay, well, it needs to be fixed. Are you positive you know which one it is?" 100%, he said with absolute confidence. "It's the right rear wheel bearing. I arranged everything. I told him I was going out of town from Thursday to Sunday, so I wouldn't need my car. It was the perfect window for the repair, especially since I had no more rental coverage and needed the car for my kid." "Does dropping it off Thursday morning work?" I asked. "Sure, no problem," he said. When I dropped it off that Thursday, I made one final, crucial request. "Listen," I said, looking him in the eye, "if it turns out to be something else, or if there are any other issues, please call me immediately. This is my only window to get this approved by insurance and fixed without it disrupting my life." Rick waved me off. "No worries. I'm positive I know what it is, but if not, I'll call." I went out of town and had a great weekend. Not a single call from Rick. On Monday morning, just as I was about to head to his shop, my phone rang. It was my insurance adjuster. He told me he'd just gotten off the phone with Rick. No work had been done on my car all weekend. I was livid. I walked into Precision Performance and rang the bell on the counter. Rick came out of the back. "Can I help you?" he asked, pretending he didn't even recognize me. "My adjuster tells me you didn't touch my car," I said, my voice tight. "What happened?" "Well, it was the right front bearing, not the right rear one like I thought," he said, shrugging. "The front one wasn't approved, so I couldn't do the work. I specifically asked you to call me if it wasn't what you thought." I shot back. "Why didn't you call?" His face hardened. "Who's paying for this? You or the insurance?" "That doesn't matter," I said, my voice rising. I told you I could get it approved while I was gone. Why didn't you call me? I don't have to answer to you. He sneered. It wasn't the approved work, so I didn't do it. End of story. With that, he turned around, snatched my keys off a hook, and shoved them at me. Take your keys, take your car, I'm done dealing with you. Fuming, I walked across the street to his manager's office to file a complaint. The manager, let's call him Carl, was on vacation. Meanwhile, I took my car back to my original mechanic. My insurance company, likely as an apology for my experience, approved the replacement of all four-wheel bearings. And it gets worse. My mechanic also discovered that Rick had used the wrong type of strut in my car during the cradle replacement and had failed to put the rivets back in the plastic wheel well liner, which caused the tire to rub against it and burn a massive hole through it. Insurance approved the replacement of both parts. As one person pointed out later, the only unbelievable part of this story is how quick and responsive my insurance company was. Carl, Rick's manager, finally called me on Wednesday afternoon, complaining he'd been busy with payroll all day. When I started to explain the situation, he interrupted me after I mentioned the ruined liner. He couldn't have ruined the liner by replacing the cradle, he snapped. I paused. Oh, so you do know what's been going on. I never even mentioned the engine cradle to you. He backpedaled. Well, I'll apologize for wasting your time, but I don't know what else you want me to do. Sorry, he said, and then he hung up on me. By choosing to be dismissive instead of concerned, Carl had tied his own fate to that of his incompetent mechanic. It was a mistake that would cost him his job. Now, for the revenge. Remember that trip I took? On my flight home, I got bumped twice before finally getting on a plane. I found my seat, put my headphones in, and settled in. I should mention, I was coming back from a party, and I was wearing a themed outfit, a full Chewbacca onesie. A moment later, a man in a sharp business suit sat down next to me. I'm an outgoing person, so I struck up a conversation. Heading home for business or pleasure? I asked. Business, he replied. What do you do? And then he said the magic words, I'm the regional vice president for Apex Auto Solutions. My eyes went wide. It was destiny. The manager, Mr. Davison, and the mechanic, Rick, had made a series of foolish, arrogant decisions, completely unaware that a chance encounter in a Chewbacca costume at 30,000 feet would bring their careers crashing down. I launched into my story, telling this VP, Mr. Sterling, everything that had happened up to that point, from the dismissive manager at his own company, Mr. Davison, to the absolute jerk Rick at the shop they had outsourced the work to. Mr. Sterling was taking furious notes. I swear his jaw was on the tray table. He gave me his personal cell number and told me he'd be having a serious talk with his manager. He also had his company pay for 5 more days on my rental car, because it turned out his manager, Mr. Davison, had decided on his own to order a used cradle instead of a new one to save money, wasting 5 days, without ever asking me or my adjuster. The next afternoon, right after my terrible encounter with Rick, I got a call from Mr. Sterling. He wanted to confirm my car was finally being fixed properly. He also told me that after my call, he had investigated and discovered that there were numerous other complaints about Mr. Davison that had been hidden and had never reached the corporate office. As a result, Mr. Davison was fired. I then told Mr. Sterling about what had happened that very morning, about Rick not doing any work all weekend and then kicking me out of his shop. He was furious all over again and said he would be in touch. After my condescending call with Carl on Wednesday, I called Mr. Sterling back and told him what Carl had said and how he'd hung up on me. About a month later, I had a question for Mr. Sterling, so I called him up. Now, I told him I had an unrelated question, and as one commenter later pointed out, who was I kidding? Of course, I wanted an update, and an update I got. Mr. Sterling told me that Apex Auto had completely stopped sending any business to Precision Performance. When the owner of that shop found out why he had lost such a major contract, he fired both Rick the mechanic and Carl his manager. The story is a powerful reminder, don't be a jerk, and always be honest in your work. You truly never know who you might be dealing with, and karma, sometimes aided by a bit of dumb luck and a Chewbacca costume, has a way of settling the score. So, what would you have done in my shoes? And have you ever had a moment of pure, unexpected luck that delivered the perfect dose of justice?